Hello and welcome to Scaling Our Relations, Caring for the Gifts of the Fish with Erin Konsmo, presented by the Manitoba Craft Council. Please give a warm welcome to Erin in the live chat. The Manitoba Craft Council was founded in 1978 as Manitoba's only not-for-profit arts organization dedicated exclusively to contemporary craft. The Manitoba Craft Council is located in Winnipeg within Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, and Dakota, and is the birthplace of the Métis Nation and the heart of the Métis Nation homeland. The purpose of the MCC is to promote, develop, and advocate for contemporary craft and its makers in Manitoba. For over 40 years, the organization has worked to ensure that contemporary craft and the artists who produce it are supported, recognized, and celebrated for their contribution to the cultural and economic life of Manitoba. For more information about becoming a member of the Manitoba Craft Council, please check out our website in the description. Erin Konsmo is located in Brandon, Manitoba on Treaty 2 territory, the traditional lands of the Dakota, Anishinaabe, Oji-Cree, Dene, and the Métis peoples. Erin Konsmo is a prairie queer who grew up in central Alberta and is a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. Their arts practice focuses on fish scale art, an art form they were mentored into by Métis artist Jamie Morse. Most recently, Erin was chosen as one of the 5 winners of the Emerging Digital Arts Awards 2021 for their digital fish scale work. The EDAA is Canada's first digital art award designated to foster experimentation in the work of emerging artists. Erin is an advocate for the water, land, and fish, and concerned about the waterways and non-human kin who call them home. Please type in any questions you have during Erin's talk into the chat, and they'll be answered at the Q&A after the presentation. So I'm going to give it over to Erin now.
Thank you, Katrina. So welcome to everybody that's joining us today for my talk, Scaling Our Relations, Caring for the Gifts from the Fish. If you're a fan of Kinosewak, also known as fish, this is the place for you tonight. Hopefully by the end of this session, you are big fans of Atikamekw, otherwise known as lake whitefish, the main material for. I want to start off by giving generous gratitude to the Manitoba Craft Council for having me to speak about my love of fish and fish scale art for the Eco Craft series. I would also like to take a moment to give a special acknowledgement to our fish relations who we are talking about today. As land acknowledgements can also be about remembering who we share the water and land with. This is especially important for my talk today. So for anybody tuned in today or later watching this recording, I just encourage you to think about the waterways that are close to you, whether those are rivers, creeks, lakes, and the relations that may call those lakes, rivers, and creeks their home. So Katrina introduced me, but I just like to ground myself in a little bit more about who I am. As an interdisciplinary artist, much of my craft and artwork is inspired by the strong matriarchs of my family, including my mom and my aunties. Many of whom have glorious sewing rooms, craft rooms, packed full of rickrack, sequins, meters of cotton, pom-pom trims, many of which have inspired me today to pick up craft work and art. I also have pictured here on the slide 4 generations of Métis women taken in the Lac-Saint-Anne region, where I'm from as well, including Elizabeth Margaret Kennedy, Caroline Jessie Taylor Beaupre, Louise Beaupre, and my grandmother Louise Ablett, who's the baby in the picture there. So many of these matriarchs are the folks who have inspired me to craft, make art, and to get into fish scale art. So, I'd like to start today by sharing some stories and encourage you to think about the stories you may hold in relationship to fish as well. So, the first picture there, where I'm quite tiny, is my first fish that I caught with my grandparents. That's a perch caught at Burnstick Lake. I recall the fish being so much bigger than in that picture. Uh, to me, when I think back to that memory, I imagine the fish being, you know, 5 feet long for how much it took to reel it into the boat. Dramatically, this fish also came with a surprise as we pulled the fish into the boat. My grandpa helped pull the fish up in a net and held it in front of me to see. Um, of course, when he held it up, I also remember it being much bigger than the tiny fish pictured there. As the fish was elevated to my height, it began to shake, just shake in the net, and it pooped all over me. So it just pooped away, and needless to say, it was a memorable fishing day, for my first catch. And on the other side, there is a picture, of me fishing this winter in Laxol First Nation Treaty Territory. And in that picture, I hope you can, start to see the reverence that I hold for fish, in the gigantic smile I have there. Um, I really have a lot of love and respect for fish and all the gifts that they share with us. Um, so I encourage you, if you're tuned in live today, to share a story you may have with fish as well. And I think there's lots of different fish stories. There's funny fish stories like the one I shared about with my first catch pooping on me. um, our stories are connected to water and place often, places perhaps where we've grown up, or places that we return to often for fishing. Um, I love a good winter as well as summer fishing story. And also think it's important to tell stories of women fishing and gender diverse people as well. So we'll start with what is fish scale art? So fish scale art is a contemporary Métis, Cree, and Dene art form originating from northern Alberta that uses whitefish scales to create intricate florals. Estimates of when this art form first began include in the 1960s in the Lac-La-Biche area and the Buffalo Lake Métis settlement. As my mentor, Jamie Morris, has said, this may be a contemporary craft form, but we've always found ways to use all of the fish or animals that we harvest. So, some themes within my fish scale art. Some of the themes and ethics include gifts from the fish, which I'll go into more here shortly. A connection to place and water being extremely important. Building Métis cultural identity through this material culture. The network of people needed to practice this craft, including Métis and First Nations kinship, digitization of craft, scale, so this idea of proportion and size, as well as fish glitter. I'll go over a few of these ethics throughout this talk. I was initially taught this art form by Métis artist Jamie Morris. So that's Jamie at the front there with the giant smile, and myself in the back in the toboggan there. And that's us going across the lake in Lac La Biche with Jamie's father, where we are setting winter fish nets. And so Jamie passed over fish gill art as an art form to me one day when she handed over a package of tweezers, Elmer's glue, your classic awesome glue, and my first bag of fish gills processed by her father, a talented Métis fisherman. So that's I think, a common craft story of a craft form being passed from um, among matriarchs or among communities. So I was kind of gifted this art form from Métis artist Jamie Morris, and was also felt really grateful to receive my first bag of cleaned fish scales from her father, who is a really talented Métis fisherman. This art form, like many crafts, is carried on by Métis matriarchs who have for generations practiced this form. And some other notable Alberta matriarchs who create fish scale art include Ruby Sweetman, Geraldine Reed, Violet Cardinal, and MJ Belcourt, to name a few. Fish scale art is sustained, if we're talking about sustainability, is really sustained through this practice of passing on this craft from person to person or generation to generation. And so naming these other artists and these craft workers is an important part to fish gill art, and remembering where this practice comes from. And while Métis may be known for their flower beadwork, we're very well known for that. I also hope we're known for the floral fish scale art that we create. Métis material culture is an important part of our identity, and fish scale art not only helps form that material culture, but is also intimately tied to our relationships as Métis people, to the bodies of water we live by, and the fish we have lived off for generations. Also pictured on this slide, um, folks may recognize your classic red rose tea. This box was inspired by um, the mentorship I had with Jamie Morris. She came and did a fish scale mentorship at our house over a weekend. And upon arrival, she asked for a cup of red rose tea, to which I had none in the house. Um, Very important when you're making craft work or art together, passing on these skills, that you have a really good cup of tea for your mentor and for the folks that you're gathered around the kitchen table with. So, um, that's a box of red rose tea with fish gill florals along the side in red, as well as some red rickrack. So never forget to have red rose tea in your cupboard if you're inviting people over to craft with you. And while I was thinking about the theme of eco-craft, sustainability, and climate change, and how this relates to my practice, I thought about the word sustainability and what that means for fish scale art. So, sustainability can be understood as the ability to maintain or support a process over time. For my craftwork practice, sustainability is not only about the materials that are used, so the fish scales, the relationships that we maintain are also as critical as the materials themselves. Sustainability is about the ability to maintain and pass on intergenerational knowledge, um, including among Métis communities, among Métis women, um, and intergenerational knowledge, not only being about the practice of making fish scale art, but also the practice of learning to spend time on the water, and to fish, and to do that in a way that supports Métis ethics as well. And of course, when thinking about sustainability, without water and fish, this material culture would not be possible. Without the relationships and intergenerational knowledge that is passed, this craft work would not continue. For that reason, both the health of the water and our nations is vital. So, um, sustainability with craft work can sometimes be seen as just the materials that we use, but it's also about the sustainability of knowledge over generations and over time. And so I'll switch gears here a little bit to talk about the importance of place and water as it relates to fish gill art. And this is an image of uh, ice fishing out on Laxal First Nation Treaty 3 territory. Um, and that hole is where the net is pulled out of from underneath the water. So lake whitefish, which is the fish that I use in fish gill art, are found across the whole Métis homeland, from the lakes of Lac Saint Anne to the Red River in Winnipeg. They are where our homes are, where we spend time on the water, and are a part of our communities and waterways. This past summer, I was sad to see the impacts of climate change related heat waves that resulted in earlier and larger fish scales in Alberta. Some of the bodies of water impacted included Wabamun Lake and Lac Saint Anne, where large numbers of dead fish were found floating on the shores and in the lake. Of these fish were lake whitefish that were dying in massive numbers. So, of course, it's important to understand the impacts of climate change, of the changes that are happening to the land and water, and also not just for ourselves, but also for our relations who are being deeply impacted by um, the changing climate as well. So these are two images of my digital work. So my work is not just in the physical form of craft for fish scale art, but I've also started to build more into digital craft space. So this includes these two images include kind of moving into that practice. These two pieces of digital work were created to showcase fish scales. So, just really magnifying the detail on an individual fish scale, and both the impacts of heat. So, the first image is an image of a heat dome, or like I during the summer when those news articles were coming out about the fish kills happening in the lakes. Um, there was also increasing reports around the rising temperatures of the Earth and the planet, and these images of these infrared bubbles were also showing up in the news. And so I felt compelled to make the connection between fish and climate change, and also the impacts of algae on lakes and water bodies as well. So many of our relatives will be impacted by climate change if we don't act now. This will also impact our material cultures, such as fish scale art. Um, Fish scale art itself is a contemporary art form that is especially popular in Alberta, a place I call home, and where I had my earliest experiences with fishing. For this reason, it is especially meaningful for me to connect with this art form that is not only regional for Alberta Métis, but also allows for a way to honor the fish. It makes sense that fish scale art is common in northern Alberta, extending into the Northwest Territories, a land base with many lakes where we are able to harvest whitefish. For this reason, fish scale art is a regional art form that is place based and created with materials from the waters where Dene, Métis, and Cree artists reside. The fish scale craft is work created with materials and histories from the land. Craft work is often seen as something that is done at home and domestic. For myself, craft is also intimately tied to the water and land. And so I'm going to pull up a video of.
Not a horrible problem to have.
No, no.
Oh,
So that was a short clip of net pulling in Treaty 6, so back home in Alberta. Um, a very large part of fish scale art is also engagement with the water and land. So this moves the craft form from just a consumeristic artistic practice where we purchase all of our materials to one that connects us with the water, culture, and relationships. Far before creation even begins, or sitting around that kitchen table making fish gill art, is the practice of being on the water. So um, I spend many days in the winter helping to set nets and pull nets, clean fish, harvest those scales. Uh, if if and spend more time out on the water fishing perhaps than the time spent in creation of the artwork. So that process of being on the water is extremely important to this craft form. So these are some additional images, setting nets and pulling nets, both in Treaty 6 and Treaty 3 territory. Um, Oftentimes I'm fishing in the winter, and as you can tell from the video as well as these images, uh, the process of fishing is one that is not just done individually, but is often done with a community of people. And I'm really grateful to both the Métis and First Nations fishers that have helped teach me over the years how to set nets, pull nets, clean fish, and yeah, harvest these beautiful gifts from the fish. So, time on the water is as important as the actual work of creating fish scale art. So, fish scale art is as much about the relationship to fish and water and processing of fish as it is the creation of artwork. This includes time on the water, and hours are spent harvesting, cleaning, dyeing, and sorting the gifts from the fish. This is an artwork that moves beyond the physical form. The work of relationship building and harvesting is as much a part of the process. So I've been using the phrase gifts from the fish to describe the materials that I use within my practice as a fish scale artist. So to go into this idea of gifts from the fish a bit more, I use the term gifts to recenter the way that these parts are understood from the fish, often referred to as waste, byproducts, or fish guts. I use the term gifts. This language comes from Indigenous teachers such as Métis artist Jamie Morris and Treaty 3 Anishinaabe educator Karen Danneman. When taking an Indigenous trappers course from Karen, she had us go through and list all the gifts from a miskwok, also known as beavers, a practice in the ethics of honoring the whole life of the animal. This process of listing and considering the whole animal changed the pace and relation in which interactions with beavers would proceed. Some of the gifts, such as like the beaver pelt, uh, are used. Other parts are returned, but there is purpose and intention to each part of any living being. So whether that's a beaver, a moose, a fish, every part of an animal or a fish has a purpose or intention. While fishing in Treaty 6 with Elder Lynn Jonasson, um, who I was pulling the nets with in the video, a fish was gut after we had pulled the net, and these guts were left out on the ice as an offering for birds and eagles in the area. It wasn't only us who were benefiting from the gifts from the fish, but also the other relations who spend time around the lake. So like eagles and other birds. Um, so there's many gifts from the fish. So of course, many of us enjoy um, eating fish. Perhaps that's the most popular gift from the fish, but there's also many others, including the fish scales, which are a huge part of my artistic practice, as well as the vertebrae. So that's the spine of fish, fish skin. So there's an increasing number of folks who are also tanning fish skins, similar to how we would tan an animal's hide, like a moose hide or deer hide. The bones and also the otoliths can be used. Um, so many of the parts of the fish can be used and should be honored as gifts that we're taking from the water. Um, Many of the gifts from the fish are also used in practices of science, such as the study of otoliths to determine the age of a fish, or the reading of fish gills to determine seasonal growth. This is a classic example of how Western versus Indigenous understandings of land. The gifts from the fish are numerous. For each of these gifts, I have been shared a purpose for their use, ranging from fish scale art, fish skin leather, a medicine for depression, glue, and rattles. While many of these parts may be tossed out by competition or sports fishers, a Métis ethic of caring for the fish is to recognize and honor these gifts. I remember the times in my partner's Anishinaabe territory where I would see these gifts from the fish discarded in the trash at fishing lodges, and would reflect sadly on how many fish skins, scales, and other gifts were simply seen as discardable, literally trash. So, like those gifts just being thrown in the trash, sometimes whole fish just discarded after being caught. Um, and that really kind of is counter to the ethics that I've been taught when, having taking a fish's life or another animal's life. And when you come to understand the many different gifts from the fish, it's hard to see yourself discard them so carelessly. If you're driven by this ethics of care and the time it takes to process and respect these gifts, it's actually hard to imagine the amount of fish some people harvest. I often ask myself If every hunter, including non-Indigenous hunters, had to follow these ethics for a moose, for example, and respect all the gifts, including tanning its hide before harvesting another moose, what our world would look like. Of course, this is what sets apart colonial land relations with Indigenous relations to the land and water. Similarly, the Manitoba Métis Federation here and their Métis laws of harvest also remind us when harvesting for sustenance, don't waste. Eat what you kill, and if there are other uses for the animal, try to do that. So, I'd also like to highlight the generous work of Métis scientist Max Leoborn. This is seen also through their work with the Clear Lab, where they do what is referred to as gut rematriation, the act of returning fish guts to the land where they were taken from, a way of doing anti-colonial and feminist science. I highly recommend reading their recent work, Pollution is Colonialism, which is a deeper dive into land relations, anti colonial science, and their work with the Clear Lab. And so I like this quote here. It says, "We got special permission to return the animal guts to the land where we got them from as a form of respect, recognizing that we interrupted cycles by removing something from its environment, so we put it back." You can see that from an Indigenous cosmology, that you return people back to the land. Or you can see it from an ecological perspective, that nutrient circulation is really important. So, fish scale art really is a whole network of relations. One of the lovely experiences of sharing my love for the fish has been that it has also expanded my network of fishers and hunters and their own understandings of the gifts that come from our relations. Uh, when I was um, living in one area, I had fishers who eventually found out that I was a fish scale artist in town, and I had them dropping off their guts or the gifts from the fish at my doorway, including fish skins, vertebrae, and scales. So once fishers had heard that there was once Anishinaabe fishers had learned that there was other purposes for fish scales, the skin, the vertebrae. You know, following that ethic, they would make sure that they kept those and stored them until a time where they could come and drop them off at our house. And I think this really speaks to how Indigenous communities respectfully process fish and animals. Um, while some people may be the fishers, the harvesters, others help to care for all of its gifts. And so I have really seen that as part of my role is to help care for some of the gifts that um, First Nations and Métis fishers or hunters um, get, because I am not much of a hunter myself. I don't always fish, so it's really lovely to have people kind of um, really uh, continue this practice of respecting the gifts by finding people who can help care for the ones that they might not use. So they might be eating the meat from the fish, but don't aren't a artist themselves. So keep those scales for the artists and community. And for folks who have dropped off fish scales at my literally at my door, fish scales, fish skins, fish vertebrae. It's been really important to give reciprocity for folks who have shared those gifts. Um, So that's involved me also giving back to local fishers and local hunters who have shared from their fishing or hunting. And so pictured in this image is a fish skin and deer hide bag that I made. Um, so you can see both fish skin on the top and the bottom, and in the center there is a deer hide that I tanned and harvested, and then fish vertebrae on the ties there. So everything from the fish is being used. And these are bags that I've gifted to fishers who have helped share their fish harvest. And so now that we've talked a bit about Métis ethics and the ethics of caring for the gifts from the fish, I'll switch gears a bit here and talk about the art of creation of fish scale art. So you see in this image, happens to be on a Tupperware lid, a very important craftwork tool for fish scale art. Um, as well as awesome miniature pair of Revlon tweezers, and my second most important tool in fish scale art, and some fish scale florals here. So we'll watch a video here of me laying out individual fish scales. So that was an accelerated video of me laying out the fish scales that I've dyed one by one. It's actually a much slower process than that. So there's a lot of upfront work to preparing the supplies used for this craft. Of course, I spoke about the time on the water, but also the actual time spent processing fish scales is also a timely endeavor as well. So these are some uh, close-up pictures of a whitefish. You can see in this one picture the lateral line, which is a line that's very important on fish and their movement in water down the center of those scales. And then another picture there with some fish scales on a spoon. So once fish are harvested, the process of caring for the gifts from the fish begins. This can include removal of fish scales and skins. Fish scales are a beautiful material. Each fish scale is as unique as a person's fingerprint. So that's something my mentor Jamie Morris reminds me. Um, and uh, from this picture, you can see fish scales of varying sizes. So there's a picture there of a fish scale from the lateral line, a fish scale that I pulled from the dorsal, close to the dorsal fin, and a fish scale pulled from the belly of the whitefish. And so the art of creation includes scaling, cleaning, and dyeing fish scales, and then the creation of fish scale florals themselves. So flowers can vary in design, shape, size, and they also reflect the teacher a person learns from, and can also reflect the florals of the region, much like beadwork varies from community and family. So a basic fish gill flower in fish gill art includes 10 fish gills and kind of forms that 5 petal design that you see in this image. So this is a really special picture to me. In on this slide, you see the work of my fish scale mentor, Jamie Morris. So that's on the top. And then my work on the bottom there. This was the first time that I actually made fish scale flowers with Jamie. Um, and so we spent a whole weekend where she sat and taught me uh, several different forms of flowers that you can make out of a fish scale. So you can see just from this shadow box, the many different flowers, buds, and leaves that you can make from just a simple fish scale. And I think it just speaks to the brilliance and beauty of fish scale art, that you can use an individual scale to make something so beautiful, like what you're seeing in this image. And I think from what I can see as well in these pictures is that it's reflective of my teacher. So the flowers that I make also look like the flowers that my mentor makes. And that's a really important uh, uh, part to fish scale art, is the mentorship that you have from people who have been taught this form. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other art that I've made. I currently have I'm part of a show with two other artists, Ruby Sweetman, another amazing fish scale artist who I mentioned in the beginning, as well as Laura Gruyere, who does really beautiful, complicated um, prints of fish who are deformed. Um, and so our work together tells the tale of a fish scale, or tells the tale of fish within Alberta lakes and rivers, and also tells some of the sad story of what is occurring to water bodies, not only in Alberta, but in anywhere where there seems to be water, uh, and how that's impacting the health of fish and the surrounding ecosystem. So this is one of my works. This is fluorescent color block fish scale art on yellow velvet. And also in this piece is caribou hair and porcupine quills. And so I'm really loving working with vibrant colors, changing the background of my shadow boxes. Black velvet is often a very common color for fish scale art, but I've really wanted to kind of branch out into some of these more bright, vibrant velvets. And as part of my practice of fish scale art, I started to branch off into digital photography, specifically macro photography, to really help show just the beautiful detail of an individual fish scale. And so what you're seeing here on this image is a digital print of a fish scale cone, an individual fish scale cone, and then actual physical fish scale flowers in between each of those cones. And those kind of blown up cones are what also help to make up the fish scale florals. So uh, digital photography has been another way for me to really magnify or scale up, bring attention to the gifts from the fish. Fish scale art has also been used to create jewelry items. So these are a few examples of my work. So these are fish scale florals on birch bark, as well as the one in purple on the side is fish scale art on tanned deer leather deer hide that I tanned. So there's some versatility to fish scale art as a craft form. These are decorative fish scale velvet pillows that I've been working on. Um, uh, uh, Decorative pillows are also a part of Métis material culture, so I kind of wanted to bring together fish scale art as well as decorative pillows into this form you see here, and maintaining, still that traditional floral on velvet. And I'm a really huge fan of trims. I loved going through the trims in my mom's sewing room. So you see that pom pom trim around the edge. And This is a part of the series as well. This is a series in red that I'm working on currently. Um, this current piece has 70 fish scale florals on it, which is the largest piece that I've done to date. So it includes over 700 fish scales, and it's taken me several days to take it this far. Um, with not counting the time on the water, the time processing the gifts from the fish. And some other examples of my work, and more specifically, some of my digital work I'll talk about. And I think that when we're thinking about sustainability as well, finding ways to use the gifts from the fish in the digital world or the digital sphere helps us to like replicate those gifts without needing to harvest more. And if we're really considering that we might have the loss of species of animals, of fish in the next few decades due to climate change. Who knows? We might not have these gifts for much longer. So um, that's also had me thinking about the ways that we can um, keep them in the digital world, and also not over harvest them as well, because we can replicate them more easily with photography and digital tools. So I've really been working on digital fish scale art, and these digital images are a way to continue to play with the art of fish scales while not allowing its physical form to limit my practice. It also allows me the opportunity to play with the idea of size through digital production. In some of the images, the size of the fish scales operates at multiple levels. So in this image, you see an individual fish scale as the center there in the kind of uh, grayscale fish scale, with a fish scale floral in the center. And then the background is a fish skin that I tanned. One of the ways I hope to magnify the gifts from the fish is by taking these otherwise small in scale gifts and scaling them up in size. I'm encouraged by Indigenous artists such as Tiffany Shaw, Nadia Amir, and Bev Koski, who have also played with scale with their beadwork through large digital prints, photography, and architecture. So you're actually seeing an image here of a mural that's in Winnipeg up at 333 St. Mary Ave. So this mural is 4 feet tall by 8 feet wide, and really is just about um, pushing and pulling this idea of scale, and calling to attention, including in urban spaces, attention to the water that is maybe just a walk down, and the fish relations that still exist in them. And this art form is literally quite small. An actual fish scale floral is generally 2 centimeters in size. So it's been great to kind of use digital tools to blow up fish scale art, and help bring attention to this craft. So playing with scale is about reclaiming space for an art form that is often minimized. By magnifying the size, I emphasize the intricate detail and beauty of our gifts from the fish, while also demanding that audiences take note and value our fish relations. It's a picture of me with my fish scale mural there. And this is another example of my fish scale digital artwork. This is the one that won the Emerging Digital Arts Award. And once again, I layer multiple different fish forms in this image. So the background is a image of actual fish scales on a fish. With the fish scale cones and then actual fish scale florals. So really just calling attention once again to the fish scale form. And I will talk a bit about my most recent endeavor, which has been to start to play around with augmented reality, to really bring attention to not just fish scale art itself, but also place, water, the fish, and the process of fishing. And so, for folks who are tuned in live or watching this video later, you can scan this QR code with your phone, and it will prompt you to open a browser where you can launch this image. And so what you're seeing in this image is what we call a fish jig or jigger. And the jigger, so that's the orange board that you see there laying on the ice, is used to set fishing nets under the ice. So you can literally help launch an ice jigger in your living room, wherever you are, with that code. And so for many folks who may struggle to have access to the land and water and fishing, I think augmented reality is a way to help people connect with fishing in urban spaces, and to also remind people um, of the fish that maybe we aren't seeing by launching it in augmented reality. And so I'll play the last video here, which is an example of So that was a new project I've been working on in augmented reality, including the fish jig that you see in the picture here, and launching that, as well as some augmented reality fish, just as another way to remind people of our fish relations. In the video that you just saw, I launched that in the city that I live, Brandon, on one of the bodies of water that runs through here. So just as a reminder that fish are all around us, and we need to take care of the water that they rely on as well as us. And I will wrap it up there. My contact information, including my email, is available there, as well as my Instagram. It's been so lovely to spend the evening with folks talking about the gifts from the fish. And I hope you spend some time thinking about the fish and all of the waters that are in the area that you live, or maybe the waters that aren't in the area you live, but thinking about the ways that we can caretake the land and water to make sure that we can carry on important practices like fish scale art. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin. That was fantastic. We have some fishing stories in chat, and I also have some fishing stories. So we'll do those first. And while we're doing the fishing stories, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. So I'm from Prince Edward Island, which is the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. And it's a fishing place, let me tell you. So I have I'm not even a big fisher, and I have lots of fishing stories. So like it's sort of fishing, more like foraging for fish, I guess. But in the beaches, there's all of these clams, which I now know are called razor clams, but we always called them piss clams. That's what everyone calls them where I'm from, because they shoot water out of the sand.
Nice.
Uh, so you go digging for piss clams with your bucket, and you wait for them to shoot their water out, and then you dig them out and hope you don't cut your hand because they're really sharp. And then you spray your sister with them and things like that, which is really fun. And then also, we used to fish for like smelts and other little fish, like in the streams and rivers. I
Mm,
grew up really rurally, like really, really rurally. And I remember always like almost being in tears, having to put the worm on the hook. Like for some
yes.
reason, killing the fish was less like horrible to me than killing the worm to eat the fish. I guess I didn't actually have to kill the fish. That might have been the difference. My dad would do it, but
Mhm.
me and my sister would have our little fishing rods and both be like, ah, putting the worms on, which is really funny. And then also, obviously, it's like an oyster place. And where I'm from, everyone eats oysters in their gravel driveways on lawn chairs, so you don't get oyster juice all over your house. So, like, you and your buddies put all your like folding lawn chairs on the gravel driveway, and you open up your boxes and you eat them, and then you just throw the
Nice.
shells on the driveway, and then the cars drive over them and they become gravel. So you can like kind of gauge how many oysters people eat by what the like gravel to shell ratio on their driveway is. I love it. It's like a thing that makes me think of home every
Oh,
time I see it. And then we have a few in the chat. So fishing story. I live in PEI. I was helping my brother on his oyster farm at high tide. This led me to going over my. This is a story by Jenny Knox. This led me to going to the water going over my chest waders, and he had to bear hug me to lift me back into the boat. This made for a great laugh and a video of my sloshy legs. The water retention is real. For non-fishy people, chest waders are the like water overalls people wear. So
mhm.
she like looked like a Michelin man with poofy legs. That would have been
Nice.
really fun. Another family favorite fishing story is my mom's family were fishing during a road trip. Her dad and her sister were fishing in a branchy spot and kept getting their hooks caught. And his dad would call for his wife, Barb, and she would diligently walk out and untangle the hook and line. What a great pun, also, Barb.
Mhm. Barb.
Barb. Um, so you have a really strong sense of color in your work, which is something that I really admire about it. You have really bold colors. Have you always dyed your fish scales, or did you start out using them undyed?
Yeah, good question. Um, I guess the first time that I made fish scale art, before I was even allowed to make a flower, my teacher, Jamie Morris, put me through the grueling process of dyeing them in several different colors and staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning, individually laying them out. Um, so I guess I started with dyed fish scales, but I also really love just the plain natural form of a fish scale, and I think I like like to do more pieces in the future, just of undyed fish scales. Um, it is like common for folks to just do entirely undyed pieces. Um, and they're generally on black velvet to kind of pop out kind of like that white color. Um, so maybe in the future more of that, but I'm really enjoying the bright colors right now.
They're so like you have such a strong sense of color because all of your colors are so bright and they look like they shouldn't go together, but they do, you know? It's very like fun to look at. The naked scales are so glittery also. I understand the appeal
Hmm,
of working with them as well.
mhm.
Um, so I feel like the scale of your work can sometimes make like when people work really small, I think sometimes people take for granted the like time and diligence that's spent kind of making that. So like how long does it take you to process a fish, like process the fish scales? And then sort of how long does it take to make those processed fish scales into a flower? I'm going to assume it's some time as a fellow craftsperson, but I think that can add some context to sort of the like your work as a whole, right? Because with small work, it can be hard to understand.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and I think my like other craft artists, like there are sometimes days in advance of the prep work just to get your materials ready. I think of that for hide tanners as well, like moccasin
Mhm.
makers. They spend weeks working on a hide. Um,
Absolutely.
for fish scale art, uh, processing the actual fish, so just gutting it, removing the fish scales, removing the fish skins, which I always make a point of keeping as well, and the vertebrae. Can take a good couple hours alone. Washing the scales takes. I usually do it over several days, so several washes. So it's at least a couple days from getting the fish in your home to actually having the materials ready, and the scales dry to the time that you can start making the actual floral forms themselves. Um, and the flowers are definitely very, like, obviously 2 centimeters, like very delicate and tiny. I feel like I
Mhm.
need to invest in, a good magnifying glass, like,
Mhm.
I don't know, if people have suggestions for that, I think I need to get on one of those.
There are these hilarious glasses I've seen that I was like actually thinking of buying where they have these like mirrors so you can look, have your head forward and be able to look down. And when you're talking about this, I instantly thought of it because I'm sure you're like here, you know? Yeah.
Very tiny work. Yeah.
Yeah, very delicate. And how long would it make take you to make like one little flower guy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting pretty good. I'd
Mhm.
say really timed, maybe 15 minutes per flower just to
Yeah.
work with it.
And
Yeah.
that's with experience. So doing your 75 flowers would be like quite a endeavor.
Yeah, no, it was ridiculous.
But
It's
like
been
wonderfully ridiculous because we all
yeah,
got to see it, you know? We appreciate that labor.
yeah.
Well, Erin, that was a fantastic talk. Thank you so much for sharing all about your fish scale art with us and encouraging us to tell our fishing stories because I think everyone has,
Oh, you
many
had some
people have
good
fishing.
ones.
Oh, yeah. Although when you're from I think when you're from a fishing place, you sort of just end up with lots of funny fishing stories because it's such a part It's so, like, I took for granted until you talk how integrated fishing is into, like,
Mm,
my childhood in life, because it just was, like,
yeah,
there's, like, piles of lobster traps and, like, it's just sort of how it is, and I hadn't really thought about that until you were talking about, like, if you don't have access to water or the ability to fish, and I was like, "Oh my goodness," I had never thought about if you live in a big city or you don't have transportation, that wouldn't be a thing, so you brought some awareness to the privilege of my
yeah,
access to fishing to me as well. So,
yeah.
anyway, thank you so much for your talk and have a fabulous night. And Erin's website is in our description as well. So, if you'd like to see more of what they are working on, you can find their information there. Have a great
Thank
night,
you for
Erin.
having me.